Hello and welcome to our technique of the month. I am super excited about today's technique, or this month's technique. Welcome everyone. I hope you're excited. We're going to be doing something I haven't done in a long time, is working with glue-based mediums. But as you remember, if you were there at the demo last Friday, I did a demo on the glue-based mediums. They're so much fun. It got me excited about doing this particular technique this month. So we are going to be doing the glue-based swipe technique, which is a really fun technique. There's a lot of different ways to do it, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. And it's going to be using glue, obviously. I'm joined today by the good people at Elmer's School Glue and Elmer's Glue Wall. So I'll talk all about the materials we'll need, the supplies. It's pretty simple and straightforward. And we'll get into the mixing formulas. I'll talk about paints. I'll talk about pretty much everything, swipe tools, and we'll do a demo at the end. So it's going to be super exciting and fun, hopefully. I haven't done one in a long time, a swipe actually with glue, so fingers crossed we get a good one. But welcome everybody. Hey, Lynn is here. Carla, welcome. Lily has joined us. Awesome. Hey, Monique. And we have got Anne with us as well, so fantastic. This is going to be kind of a lot of show and tell before we dive into our demo. But as usual, I have created a PDF for you. It's called the Glue Swipe, or Glue-Based Swipe Technique. And you can find this inside the membership. It's in the Technique section under the Glue-Based Swipe. And I've got this in there right now for you. Or if you go to the PDF section inside the Technique walkthrough sheets, it is also in there. So it's pretty straightforward. I'll talk about everything that's on this page pretty much. And I'll share two different mixing formulas with you. One is, you might have seen it already if you've taken the Foolproof paint mixing course. And then the other one is kind of the standard glue formula that I use for a lot of different techniques. So let's dive in. And I have collected a large group of stuff. Not quite sure where to start, but let's start with the glue first. So instead of using Floetrol as our pouring medium, we're going to be using glue as our pouring medium. And the reason we use glue, it's affordable, it's relatively inexpensive. There's different types of glues we can use, but the glue has this magical reaction when we use silicone or dimethicone, or like the coconut hair serum is what we're going to be using. And something about the glue and the oil just creates these beautiful cells when it gets heated. Sometimes you don't even need the heat, but when it gets heated, they form these beautiful cells that I really love. And it's one of the very rare times I like to use the oil additive in my paints. So the painting right behind me is actually a glue-based swipe that I did quite a while ago. I think it was a demo. It was kind of a abstract type of swipe technique, but they're really fun to do. I like them a lot. You can do a lot of different techniques with the glue-based formula, but we're going to be focusing on the swipes this month, and we'll see how you like it. But you could also, I'll talk about some other techniques you can use this formula for. So let's talk about glue. So in front of me, I've got a big old gallon of Glue All, Elmer's Glue All, and then over here I've got a gallon of Elmer's School Glue. You don't have to buy a gallon. They come in smaller quantities than that. I like to get this size, actually. You can get this size at Michael's. This is the School Glue, but I believe they do make the Glue All version of this. And if you really get into this technique, I recommend getting like one of these or a couple of these smaller sizes. And you can buy the gallons and then refill these smaller containers. Makes it a little easier to fill up your pouring cups with this instead of trying to pour out of the gallon, which can be really messy. So, but I would recommend, if you've never done this before with the glue, get a couple of these small ones to test it out. Or you could get one of these. The school glue is cheaper than the Glue All. But frankly, the results I get are very similar. I'm sure maybe the Glue All has a little more durability, longevity perhaps. But if you're just getting into this, if you're just testing it out, feel free to go with the school glue. I've used this many, many times. It works really well. You can also use the clear glue. I don't have any clear glue with me at the moment, but I have used the Elmer's clear school glue. It does work as well. You might get, I find it a little bit thinner, so your consistencies might be a little different when you add water to thin out your paints. But the white will dry clear, obviously, as well as the Glue All. All these glues will dry clear. The clear Elmer's is just clear at the beginning, so it's not white to start with. I have tried some other glues, other brands of glue. One I've tried is actually Amazon Basics has a white and a clear glue. I've tried this a couple times. I've tried their white a couple times. It works pretty good. I like it. You have to order it though. It's a little, it takes a little longer to get than just running down to Michael's or Walmart to get school glue, and it's a little more expensive, I found. I will warn you though, if you find some kind of random brand of white glue, there's a bunch of different brands out there. I would not go to the dollar store and get their white glue. Some white glues or clear glues, and the magical ingredient in these glues is called PVA. They're all made with PVA, which is polyvinyl acetate, a big scary name, but don't worry about it. All these glues are made relatively the same. But some glues, I have found that if you add the acrylics and start mixing them, it turns into silly putty. It turns into like this rubbery mess. So, so be careful if you're just getting some random brand of white or clear glue. I have not ever found any problems with the Elmer's school glue or Glue All or the Elmer's clear, but different brands of paint can react differently with the glue. So I'll kind of talk about some of the brands I've used and some of the brands that I normally use. They all seem to work just fine with the glue. So that's the first one. First step in our process here is getting the glue. Now there are a lot of different formulas. A lot of different artists have their own way of mixing up the glue. A lot of them mix it with water, so they have a fancy mixture of 70% glue, 30% water. They add this into another container, and then they call that their pouring medium. I just use the glue straight out of the container, straight. I don't mix it or pre-mix it with anything. I just put it right into my mixing cups, add the paint, then I add the water as I need it to just get the right consistency. There's nothing wrong with pre-mixing your glue and water beforehand, other than eventually you're going to get kind of moldy glue because the water is going to want to generate mold after a little while. So if you want to just keep it fresh, I just go straight out of the container right into the cup. I'll show you how I do that, and we'll mix up a paint maybe. I'll show you how to mix up a paint. But there are a lot of different formulas. Some people use Floetrol and white glue. I have tried that a few times. It's okay. I've not really loved the results. So I just use the straight glue. Just glue by itself, paint, a little bit of water, and that's it, aside from our additives, which is the dimethicone or silicone. So very simple formulas, and you can get some very cool results. And so I'm going to kind of push these aside here. And I'm going to get rid of this Amazon one, put it down here. So I've already mixed some paints up, but let's talk about paints. Now I have two different formulas that I mix, or I've used. One is the Foolproof glue formula, and that is, I created that whole course using that formula, and that was using craft paints. So any of the craft paints, and I use those because they're cheap, they're easy to find, not a huge investment. So So you can mix a whole lot of, you can mix paints up. It's very simple, but the way I use that formula, and these are kind of the craft paints, so like the Folk Art Metallics, or like the Craft Smart craft paints like this, or one of my favorites is the DecoArt Americana. This is a little more expensive, little better brand. Feel free to use these if you have them. It works great with this formula. Or like the DecoArt Metallics. So I've used a lot of different craft paints, but those all work really well. They're easy to find. You can get them at Walmart. You can get them at Michael's, of course. Joann Fabrics, they have craft paint too. Be careful with the Apple Barrel White by itself. That can cause some cracking, but I've used many of their other colors and they've never had any problems. So Apple Barrel paints work great as well. And the formula for that, if you're going to be using the craft paints, is 1 part paint, 1 part glue, and then usually just 1 capful of water gets it to the proper consistency. So it's a very simple formula to follow. I'm probably not going to be doing the craft paints during our demos. I'm going to be using our tube paints. And that formula, if we're going to be using kind of our standard, like their Master's Touch or Liquitex Basics or Amsterdam paints or Artist Loft paints, those I like to use 2 parts glue to 1 part paint. And of course, this is all on your sheet for you. And then we have to add water to get the proper consistency. So the formula is really simple. It's pretty much the same as the Floetrol Easy Recipe formula. 2 parts Floetrol to 1 part paint. Well, 2 parts glue, 1 part paint, and then water. Now, we're using the glue straight, so the glue is much thicker than the Floetrol. So I like to put in the glue first, then I'll add the paint, and then start adding water gradually to get the proper consistency. And we always want to get our glue, paint, and water all mixed up before we add any silicone. That is the very last step, is adding any of our silicones. So I'll flip the camera here and let's talk about silicones a moment. And there are several that you can use. There's one in particular that you probably know that I prefer, but I'm going to flip the camera and we'll talk about some silicones. This is kind of the magic ingredient that makes the whole thing work. We kind of need to add an oil into our paints to get these beautiful cells to kind of magically bloom out of the glue when we add our heat. So let me pull these over. I've used several different types of silicone. There are a lot you can try, but let me flip the camera and let's take a look at our silicone here. So, okay, so you can't see any of them, but let me turn them down. So the first silicone I started using, it might have been the one that you started with, is the Spot On pouring, well, they call it just Spot On treadmill belt silicone. I had a bottle of that. It's in a green label. Then they came out with this yellow label version. It's exact same stuff, but they called it Precision Pouring Oil to make it sound all fancy. But it did come with this cool needle tip in there, which is kind of neat. It made it easier to get a little bit, get smaller drips out of your big bottle. I like to always put the silicone or the coconut oil in smaller containers. So I have these little needle bottles that I have bought. You can buy them in like a pack of a dozen or so for a few dollars from Amazon. This one is the coconut serum, which I prefer. But you just transfer some oil into these smaller needle tip containers. It makes it so much more convenient and easier to add your additives into your paints. So this worked good for me. I used this many times. I taught lots of classes in person using this. And that was using actually Floetrol, not the glue. And you can swipe with the Floetrol. That's kind of a something to talk about a different day, but it does work really well. I've done lots and lots of paintings using Floetrol, but I really like the cells we get with the glue medium much better. So I don't really use the Spot On anymore. It does work fine, but it leaves that oily residue much more prominent than some of these other, well, especially the coconut oil. It leaves that oily residue much more. So I've just kind of stopped using this, and I use these other ones. I use the coconut milk pretty much exclusively now. I've talked about that many times. You can get this at the grocery store or Walmart. It's in the beauty aisle with the hair products. It's by OGX, and the most important thing about this is they have a few different products that say coconut something or other on them. We want to find the one that says coconut milk, but more importantly, if you flip this over, the number one ingredient is dimethicone, and it's impossible to see that, but you might be able to see this one. This is another type of dimethicone, and you can see that right there, dimethicone. This is a Live for Art brand dimethicone. Dimethicone is another form of silicone that's used in like beauty products and things like that. So it's just another type of silicone. This one works pretty good. I got this one on Amazon. I've used it several times. I like it, but I just always go back to the coconut milk serum. It just smells good. I like it. So, but you know, something like this works. There's a lot of different brands now, but that you can experiment with. But I just kind of found this one that I like, and it works for me. Even Artist Loft at Michael's has a silicone oil that they sell. And this is really expensive. One of my students, my old students, gave this to me because they bought it and they didn't like it. I have to say, I tried it once. Wasn't thrilled. It's basically the same thing as the Spot-On treadmill belt stuff, but much more expensive. So I would probably stay clear of this one. You can get this one for $6, I think, at most grocery stores or places like Target, Walmart. This is going to last you forever. I mean, if you go through this whole container, you're doing a ton of painting. So this will last you for a long time. If you can get a couple little needle bottles like this, put them in there, and you'll be good to go. So this is what we're going to be working with this month for our additive, our oil additive. And so if you have any questions about that, of course, it's on Amazon if you want to find it on there, if you can't find it locally. And so that is our little talk about silicones. There's a lot of them out there. Feel free to try any of them you want. They should all work relatively the same. But that's just I kind of like try to keep it simple and use one thing at a time. So I'm going to move some of these out of the way. So we have our glue, and we've got our paints, and we've got our silicone, and we have our formula. Next up, we need a torch, of course, and so this is the torch I like. You probably have seen it many times. I use it mostly to pop air bubbles, but it works really well for this technique, of course. You can try using a heat gun or a heat wand. I've got a heat wand somewhere, but it's like this small little straight heat wand. You plug it in. It's like a mini, heat gun, I guess. That might work too. I really only use the butane torch, though. It just works really well for me. It's convenient to use. I've talked about this one. I've given many of these away as prizes, so it works really well. And so that's what we're going to be using we're not going to be popping air bubbles, but we'll be using this to bring the cells to life, which is super fun. I love doing it, and it is like this magical little experience. So that is our torch that we're going to be using. Finally, for swiping, we need to have some kind of a swiping tool. Here's my handout, and I like to make my own. And so I've got a variety of different swipe tools here that I have made. I like to use these thin plastic sheets. This one is made out of acetate, which you can get an acetate pad, but that can be really expensive. It's just a very thin plastic. I like the plastic because it's smooth. You can reuse these over and over again. I just tape a sheet of this to a a piece of foam core. It's very simple. And I've used these many times, and I've got a bunch of different shapes. But instead of getting an acetate, like a pad of acetate, you can use something much easier to find, which are these like dividers, these notebook dividers, these thin plastic sheets that work really well. And on one side they have like the little holes to put in your notebook. This particular one has like a tab on the other side, which is not ideal. So you don't want to slice this off or slice off the other side, or you could use the the shorter end like this. I would probably cut this in half, put a piece of foam core on there, or you could use it, cut it in half, and you just get a little easier to manage piece of plastic. But these work really well. You can find them anywhere. I think I got these at the dollar store or Walmart for just a couple bucks. The great thing is you can reuse them, just paint wipes right off. If they get really messed up, you can use a little alcohol wipe, and that will bring all of the paint right off of the plastic, which is really cool. So we need a swiping tool. You could also use a paper towel or a damp paper towel. Those are very popular for swiping. You can give that a try. I prefer and am used to the plastic swiping tools, so that's what I'll be using. But feel free to try out the wet paper towel or paper towel pieces. And of course, there's lots of ways to swipe. This is mostly for a single swipe where it kind of covers the entire canvas in one go. But we could do multiple swipes with smaller pieces of like a paper towel or things like that. And we'll get into that. That's another variation that we'll look at maybe next week in our Pouring Night Live. But so those are the swiping tools that we'll be using. And so pick up a couple of these plastic sheets, plastic divider sheets. They work really well. And let's see, any questions? I thought I saw a question. Kathy is asking about the silicone. Does silicone have an expiration date, or does it remain potent for a long time? I would think it should remain potent forever. I wouldn't really see any kind of expiration date with it, because it's basically a chemical. So it's just going to stay, it should stay the same no matter how long you use it. I guess it could go bad. I've had this for a long time, for years now, and it still works just the same as it did when I got it. So that's a good question, though. I don't think you have to worry about that. And all right. And Kathy also has a comment. I've used those slick sales flyers that come in the mail. That's a great idea. Yeah, if you can find those like laminated like mailers, that would work good too. And the paint should wipe right off of those as well. Great comment, Kathy. Good idea. And we've got a comment. I have straight PVA. Could I use it in this formula? I'm not sure. The straight PVA, it might be more of a liquid, like a more fluid solution. I haven't really used that, so I'm not sure. You can give it a try, but I can't really comment on that. I'm not quite sure if that would work. So, good question. And Lynn is asking, what is the tape on the bottom do? Like the tape on this? The tape on this is just to hold the plastic sheet to my little piece of foam core. So that's what the tape is for, just to hold this together. And that's what I do. And I just make these. I make them pretty quickly. I haven't made a new one in a while, but I'll be using a couple of these one of these in our demo. But so that is what the tape is. If you're referring to this right here, don't worry about that. I'll be talking about that in a second. But let's see here. Just checking to see if any other questions came in. And Anne mentioned make sure you are in a well-ventilated space when using glue. That's always a good idea. I think you could probably use the Elmer's school glue without any problems. It's non-toxic, so I don't think you'd have to really worry about that too much. These are just very simple, glues, and don't let that PVA scare you. It's a very kind of inert chemical. So like in the school glue, non-toxic. So, and kids, I'm sure, eat this all the time. So, but I wouldn't recommend that. But that's a great point though, Anne. Thanks. So let's talk about our next step. Like, how are we going to do this? Let me show you how to mix up a color first. So let me flip the camera over to this one. And so here I just have one of my regular old mixing cups. This is a 5.5 ounce mixing cup. I'll just take one of my, oops, there it is. Take one of my measuring guides or my mixing guides. This is a 2-to-1 part, and I actually use milliliters in this one. So I just drop that in there. I'll take my Sharpie. I'll just mark my 1 and my 2, and we're good to go. And we'll put that away. I'll just grab my glue. And so the glue all or the school glue will work the same way, or the clear glue. So let's just use the school glue. I'll turn my little lines for you. So I just drop it in there, get it up to the line as close as I can, and that's it. We've got our glue. And let's mix up another color here. Let me grab one. Let's see, what do I want? What do I want? Let's mix up some gold. So I'll just use some Artist Loft gold. And we'll just put some of this in there. I like to swirl it around, and you kind of have to eyeball this one because it's not going to sink into the glue like it does into the Floetrol. So if you can kind of see this, I'll kind of hold it up and see, it's like about 1 part, maybe a tiny bit more. But again, you don't have to be perfectly exact with this. I'll grab a stick, and we're pretty close. So now what we're going to do is just going to mix this up. And it only takes, a little bit of time, a few stirs, and it's mixed in there pretty well. But it is going to be real thick. So remember to scrape the sides, scrape the bottom. And once you get kind of everything mixed pretty well, and that's pretty good, we're already there. I like to scrape the stick off because there's going to be a bunch of paint stuck to the stick, and then we can kind of reincorporate that back into our big mixture. And now let's start adding some water. And this will take quite a bit of water. So I'll put in a nice squirt there, and then just start working it in. And the consistencies for these mixtures, the consistencies I like to use for the swipe technique is the number 2 or the number 3 technique. So either the small mound or the slight mound. And the number 1 technique works good for other glue pours, like a ring pour or a flip cup. I like to use the number 1. But for the swipe, since we're swiping and we want a real even coat on our canvas, I like to have it a little bit thinner, just it makes the swiping easier. If the paint is a little too thick, it can leave like some pockets or things as we're swiping over it. So like some air pockets or things like that where the swipe tool hasn't contacted the paint thoroughly. So it's just a little bit easier, I find, to have a little bit thinner consistency for the swipe. So I'm just continuing to add water. and mixing it in. And all the colors and brands will take a little bit different amount. But I just like to turn my cup and keep on mixing every now and then. Scrape off my stick. And then we can start to check it. It's feeling like it's pretty close. So, if you can see this, let me zoom in a little bit. There we go. And I'll show you kind of what the consistency is looking like. Now, this is a bit close to the number 1. It's a little, still maybe a touch too thick for the number 1, but we need a little bit thinner than that. So, another little squirt. And you'll notice that the glue formula feels a little bit different than the Floetrol formula. It does feel a little bit creamier. Carla just mentioned it looks very creamy. It does feel a little bit creamier. It just has a little different feel to it. But once you know, the drip test kind of still works. And that right there, it would be the number 1 consistency, I would say, with the glue. But we need it a little bit thinner than that still. So I'm going to just add a little bit more. And again, just get as close as you can and test it out. It's not super critical. Everything else will still work. Even if you're a little too thick or a little too thin, it should work just fine. And if it doesn't, you can always make adjustments on your next painting. So that looks pretty good. It's pretty close. I like that. So I'd say that is, we're at our number 2 right there. Let me show you maybe the purple. I've mixed these up already. And I'll show you this consistency. It looks very similar. And it feels very similar to the gold. So I think we're in good shape. We've got a new color mixed up and we are good to go. So I'll just leave that in there. So that is how you mix that up. It's very simple. It's not a complex formula or anything. Now, if that's using, of course, the 2 paints, and let me throw this back here on the top camera. Now, if we're going to mix up the craft paints, then it's a 1-to-1 ratio, and then so that changes a little bit, and it's a 1-to-1 because most of these craft paints are thinner consistency than our tube paints. So, and they're not quite as pigment loaded. The pigments are not quite as strong. So we want to use a little bit more of our craft paint than we would our tube paints. Tube paints have a higher pigment load in those colors. So that's just a quick note about that. So let me show you the colors I've got mixed up here. I've got a deep purple. And this is not the band, but it is Master's Touch Violet, and then I've added some Payne's Gray. So it's kind of a darker than it normally would right out of the tube. So it's kind of a 50-50 mixture. So it's a nice dark purple. And I have got a nice pretty light blue. That is a cerulean blue from Artist Loft, and I did put a little bit of white in there just to lighten it a tiny bit more. I have got this beautiful kind of ocean green, which is called Ocean Green from Master's Touch. I love that color. I've got the Brilliant Purple right here, which is one of my favorites. Brilliant Purple, Liquitex Basics. I have got our gold that we just mixed up from Artist Loft. And one thing I always do, and I didn't show you this, but I should, I I always put a G on the side of my cups if I'm using a glue mixture. So I mark them with a G, and then also, and I can't really show you this because I'll dump out the paint, but then you could do a /S if you put silicone in there, just so you know what's in your cup. Because you don't really want to mix the glue-based paints with the Floetrol-based paints. It can be kind of, the results can be kind of weird. Sometimes they don't like to play nice together. So I would avoid mixing the two. And then here I've got it's another gold. It's gold, again, no, I used the Liquitex. I used the Liquitex Basics Gold, and I also added a little bit of the metallic orange, just to give it a little more of an orangey gold look and a little more richer color. So those are the colors I have. And we're going to be, now there's a bunch of different ways you can swipe. So one way, and this is a way I taught a lot in my in-person classes, we would mix all our paints up. We'd only put silicone in the swipe color, which goes on top. So in this case, I'm going to be using the purple as the swipe color, the dark purple. So that's one way to do it, is we can mix up your paints, but only one color, the swipe color, gets silicone. Now there's another way to do it, which is we put silicone in all the paints if we wanted to, including the swipe color. And what that's going to do is give us tons of cells. And as soon as we swipe, cells will start appearing. So that's another way we can swipe. A third way we can swipe, which is what I'm going to be demonstrating tonight, is we can put silicone in most of our paints, but don't put it in our swipe color. We leave the swipe color without any oil. And what that will do, hopefully, is when we swipe over our painting, we'll get this really nice kind of gradation or really nice blended field of color. And then we might get a few cells popping up here and there, but then when we torch, that is really what's going to bring the cells to life. So that's what I'm going to show you. So we're not going to put any silicone in our purple. And actually, I did put some in some of these other colors after I mixed them up, just so we could move things along a little bit. But what we want to do is give them a nice stir. But I'll show you how I add silicone with our gold that we just mixed. So I'm just going to give these a little stir. And so we're not going to put anything in there. So let me put a little bit of silicone. I'm going to put in 3 drops. 1, 2, 3. And we want to spread them around our cup. We don't want to drop them right on top of each other and create one big drop. We want to keep them separated. Then we're going to mix them in. And we can mix, we don't have to mix just real slow, but we can give it a good mix. Maybe between, I don't know, 6 to 12 stirs, something like that. And I think that's good. And we're just kind of breaking up that silicone and spreading it in throughout the paint. So we've done that. And we are ready to go. Now I have one final thing to show you. And I'll have to, this is another demo I'm going to be doing. And I'm going to move these paints aside so we don't dump them over. And so you might wonder, because in the demo we just did on this last Friday, I made a point of talking about putting a base coat down. And this is the canvas we're going to be working on. I've already painted it. I put and this paint is dry. I put a thin coat of blue on, because what we're doing is we're going to be putting all these colors that have our coconut oil in them already right on the canvas. But what that can do potentially is the silicone can open up the paint, and we could maybe see those bare spots of canvas. Well, if you paint your canvas first, it kind of hides those. It masks them. And so you might notice them more when the paint is wet, but once it's dry, it won't be these big white spots. It'll be like this blue color. So that's just something I like to do if I'm using this particular technique of putting silicone in most of my paints, but not the swipe color. And I'll demonstrate how to kind of put on a simple coat of acrylic for you right now. So I'm going to, actually I have to zoom out a little bit. And I've got another canvas. So I'm going to take this one away. And I prepped this canvas. I just put some pins in the bottom. I didn't tape it because we're not going to be doing a lot of tilting, so we don't have to really worry about messing up the back too much. So here's just a regular canvas. It's an 11 by 14, just kind of a smaller, easier to manage size. And we're just going to put on like a thin coat of paint. And so I'm going to pick a color here. Maybe I'll use the green. So I'll use our ocean green this time. And what we can do, I'm just going to squirt some paint. And you don't need a lot. That's plenty right there. Right on our canvas. And I'm going to take my squirt bottle and just give it a little spritz, just to add a little water right to our canvas and our paint. Then take a brush. This is like I used this one earlier to paint the blue on, and that blue I painted this morning. So it's been dry for a few hours. That's all you really need. So you don't have to wait till it cures or anything like that. This is just a thin coat of acrylics. So just a thin, soft brush. This one I got, this is a pretty cheap brush. Here's another one that's a little more expensive, but still pretty affordable. Nice and soft is kind of what we're looking for. And we're just going to start blending our paint and just moving it over the canvas. And the water helps kind of dilute the paint just a tiny bit, but makes it easier to spread. And just like that, we're almost there. We've almost covered everything already. And we could also do the sides if we wanted to. So you can pick up your canvas, do the sides. This is also a good idea if you're doing any other technique that's using the silicone, is just giving your paint, or canvas, a quick coat of paint just to protect against those bare canvas spots. Or sometimes using Floetrol and other techniques, the paint can pull away from the edge of your canvas, so this also helps that. And so I'm painting the edges real quick here. But this goes very fast. So you could do multiple canvases at once. And then I'm just using one of the colors that is in my color palette. So, and then you can give it a final coat. You can vary your brush marks if you want. This is fun. And that's all that we're done. So we've covered our canvas. We can let this dry. It'll take just a few hours, and then you're ready to paint. So with your brush, you can, what I like to do is just pull all the paint out of my brush with either a paper towel or tissue. Just kind of pull out the max amount. You can also kind of beat it on your paper towel or tissue, and then I'm not going to clean the whole brush, but then I have like a little container. I'd put a little bit of water in my little container, rinse out the rest of the water in there. I'll show you that. It doesn't take a lot. Oop. Just a smallish amount of water. And that gets most of the paint out. I don't want to drip that on my canvas. And then you can dump the water in my bucket that I have under my table, and then you're pretty much good to go. You can now you could rinse this out in the sink with a little soap if you wanted to, because there's very, very, very little paint left in there, so you don't have to worry about that. There's almost no paint in there, but you don't want to give it a little rinse with warm water to get the final little bit of acrylic out. So that's kind of how I would just paint a canvas quickly, and now it is all protected, ready to go for doing a swipe. Now I'll pull my blue one back up. So the blue one is dried, of course, so that's perfectly fine to use. If you try to go right on the wet canvas, you want to let it dry, just because you can this can get messed up, and it can still pull away the wet paint and reveal the white canvas. So you definitely want to let that thin layer of paint dry first. So I'm going to get this out of the way. I'm going to put you on mute for a second. I'll be right back. Okay, so time to do our demo. Let's go ahead, and we've mixed up all our paint. We know what our formula is. We've added some coconut oil. Let's throw it on the canvas and do a swipe and see what happens. Just a sip of water. Okay. So again, purple, we're going to put that over there. We're not going to use that yet. And we've got our brand new gold. We've got our other colors here. And what you can do all kinds of things. You could do like a gradation if you wanted to. If you had like light to darker colors. You can put the paint on any way you'd like. I like to just pour it on. And I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet. I'm just going to start pouring on some colors. Kind of overlap them. And there's a couple ways we can get the paint covering our canvas. And put on some of our orange. Maybe some of our gold, just a little. Run the gold around. Now, we could take a palette knife if we wanted to. And we could spread the paint around with our palette knife. And I'll just kind of show you that. And I've done that many times. That's a good way of getting the paint on there. Or we could just keep adding some paint and then tilt it around. And I put a little more blue on and cover the canvas that way. And this will take a little bit more paint than it normally would for a Floetrol swipe or Floetrol flip cup or something like that. And we want a good amount of paint on there, so we have a nice kind of bed of paint to swipe on. So I can't really give you measurements or amounts, but I think we're in pretty good shape right now. So we can just start moving our paint around, and this is really fun. This is basically a direct pour is what we're doing. So we're going to just tilt our paint, cover our canvas. And go over this side and then this corner down here. We're kind of losing some of that orange, but that's okay. We'll come back and we can add some details. So the first part of this is just getting some paint on there, tilting it around, and getting the canvas covered. And we have a nice, super even layer of paint. Then we kind of want to recenter it a little bit. And that looks good, but I want to add some more, but I'm not going to dump it on there like I did to begin with. I'm going to be a little more careful how I add some extra paint. And so let's take the gold. I definitely want to add a little more of our orange. So I'm going to take my stick, my mixing stick, and then I'm going to do some drizzling. And drizzle it around in these thinner lines. And then it'll help the cells. You can have some cells in cells and help the cells have different colors and things like that. So I like to add some extra color this way. That's looking pretty good. Maybe I'll add a little more of our gold to some areas. Kind of like that. This is a very Jackson Pollock technique. Oops, if you know who he is. This is all his style right here. The drips. A little more purple. How about a little more of our green in little areas? So you could come up with a design. This is kind of a very random all over design that I'm doing. You could be a little more careful and think it through a little bit more. I'm just kind of throwing stuff on there. And I kind of like that. So I think we're in pretty good shape there. You can continue or if you want to, but I think we've got plenty of color and we've got a nice layer of paint. And this is, by the way, this is a technique all in its own. And you could just leave it like this. And you could also, you don't have to swipe. You could torch right now and bring up those cells, and that could be very cool. Other thing you could do, and these are all just, you know, different things you could try. You could tilt a little more. You can modify what we just put on there. It's not really going to matter for doing a swipe though. So, but if you wanted to keep this and not do a swipe, just keep it more of a direct pour. You could tilt more, modify that, and that would give it some more organic, or more organic look and feel, and that'd be very cool. So, but we want to cover this with a dark layer and then bring up the cells through that darker layer. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to do you could do a traditional swipe, which is adding color to one edge of your canvas. It could be the short edge, it could be the long edge. Swipe in one direction, kind of in one go. That's one way to do it. I found it's very difficult to pull a color evenly over a whole canvas like that. So you could also do, which is what I'm going to do, a center swipe, which is not necessarily going to be right in the center, but it's going to be off center. But we're putting a band through kind of the middle or the third of our canvas, and then swiping in two directions. So, and that is what we're going to do right now. And that allows the paint to kind of allows the color to cover a little more evenly over the whole canvas. So I'm not going to go right in the center, just maybe above the center. Oh, it's a lot. And I want to go in a relatively thin stream. That was a little too much, but it's okay. I think we'll be all right. And now we're going to just use one of our tools and swipe it off. Is this the one I want? Nope. I want my larger one. So we're going to do this in one go. Now, before I do it, you could do smaller swipes with paper towels and just pull multiple small pieces. Maybe I'll do that on the second half. So let's go ahead and do one swipe. So I'm just gonna, on my swiping tool, I have a little piece of tape that you can see here, this little tab, which I can hold on to and then carefully lay right in my paint. So this takes a little practice, takes a little patience. So we're just gonna kind of lay that in there. And we want just the edge of our swiping tool to make contact all the way across. And then we're just gonna slowly pull the swiping tool down the canvas. And we're gonna get variations in color, but that's cool. That's gonna help us. It's gonna give us a more interesting painting. And then as I approach the edge, I want to kind of pull it off right at the end. I don't want to let it just roll off, because that can leave you a big white edge on your canvas. But remember, we painted our canvas, so you don't have to worry about that too much if you pre-paint your canvas. Now we are getting cells happening right away, which is okay, and that can happen. And let's see, I'm going to flip this around. I like to swipe left to right. It makes it easier. And I'm going to take one of my I'm just cutting one of the dividers up, and I'm going to make some smaller pieces. And then you can swipe with those. So I just cut it up real quick. So now we can, I'm going to take, and you can hold this by hand if you have these smaller pieces. I'm going to move up as close as I can into the purple band. And then pull down. And that wasn't the greatest. So I'm going to just leave that to sit there for a moment. Let me try another one. I like to cut off the real sharp edges of the plastic so they don't dig into the paint. Oh, so let's just try that again. Just kind of let it float on there. And this is a multiple swipe with multiple pieces, and then we can the great thing is, unlike paper towels, you can just wipe it off and go right back and do it again. Uh-oh. So again, you have to be gentle and kind of delicate. Let's see if I can do another easier one. Very gentle, just kind of let it lay in there. You don't have to put any pressure on it at all. That went better. And we're getting lots of cells already popping up, so that can happen. Okay, one more. There we go. Okay, oh, sorry, that last one was a little off of the screen. So I have some mess ups, right here, but I'm not too worried about that. Let's grab our torch and start torching. So I'm going to hold the torch up high, turn it on. Actually, that's a little much. I'm going to kind of go to a medium setting with that's a little too low. Next one over. Kind of a medium setting, and then we're going to bring the torch down And as soon as you see the little specks happen, you can just pull your torch back up. And then just let that do its thing, and the cells will start to appear. And they will take a little bit of time. And we had that big band. I used too much purple, so right in the center here, there's so much purple, it might be difficult for the cells to pop through that, because I did use just too much paint. I poured on too much. But one thing we could try, I'm going to try swiping this way. Whoa. It got away from me. But let's try it. And the swiping part is the trickiest part. It does take a little practice. Let's give that a torch, see if we can get some cells to pop up around here. Okay, so it's just fun to watch. We got some big ones, we got some little ones. I'm gonna just try one more thing here. I'm gonna try to just pull a little purple out of this. There we go. Yeah, we got like a few cells popping up in there. So yeah, you definitely need to want a thinner band than I use. I use way too much to pour my band of paint. And that is pretty much how you do a glue swipe, or a swipe with the glue-based medium. And these are really fun to do. I like them a lot. And you know, you could do the single swipe, which it can be a little trickier. So like the multi-swipe gives a little more variation. It's a little easier to control at first. So I suggest, you know, giving both a try, see what you like best. And let's see. And you can try to bring up a few more cells after they stop growing, and see if you can pop up any more. But I really like the look of the glue cells. To me, they're very pretty. They're nice and kind of round in shape. You get some cool multi-cells, multicolor cells. We have a few of those. So it's just a really fun technique to try. And Carl is asking, why are the cells bigger in the middle? Probably because we have a little more concentration of silicone in there for some reason. We have these kind of larger cells popping up here and there. I'm not exactly sure why they're popping up right there in the middle. But it has something to do with, there was a little more oil in, you know, that part. But I'm not exactly sure why they do what they do. But that's part of the fun. Let's see here. All right. Any questions that you might have about the technique, or about the colors, or any of the formulas, let me know. I'd be happy to answer your questions. This will kind of develop over the next, I'd say, 20 minutes, 30 minutes or so. And it can change quite a bit. But, and then right here, you'll notice I've got, if I hadn't painted my canvas, I've got blue spots right here and right here. So that would mean the white canvas would be showing up right through these two spots. So I definitely recommend, if you're going to do this style, putting the silicone in lots of colors and then dumping them right on the canvas, to definitely, you know, give your canvas a coat of paint first. Okay, so let me flip back here. I think that looks pretty cool. I like the colors. We've got nice contrast with the dark purple and then kind of those blues and those aqua and some hints of gold and that orangey color. So it's kind of fun. So let me flip on back here. Any final questions before we break? And be happy to answer them. And oh, Carla had a question from before. She's asking, did the glue formula leftovers store as well? Not really. The glue, I mean, it wants to dry and get hard. So the glue, I would really mix it up and try to use it in a couple days of mixing it up. Otherwise, I find it doesn't really work as well, especially if you mixed in the oil, the coconut oil. It can kind of, the coconut oil can kind of move around in the paint a little bit, and it can kind of lose some of its potency, I think. But just the glue by itself, it doesn't hold up quite as well. But you can use it for, I'd say, up to, you know, three or 4 days probably. Lynn is asking what colors I used for the orange. That was gold. It was Liquitex Basics Gold and then Artist Loft Metallic Orange. So mostly gold, a little bit of orange, and that kind of created that really pretty golden orange color. All right. Okay, so thanks so much for joining me. I don't see any other questions coming in, but we'll have a demo Friday, and I'm getting prepared for the workshop next Wednesday. And so that's going to be kind of a crazy week. We're not going to meet Wednesday for our Painting Night Live. I think we're going to meet Tuesday, but I'll put that in the email to remind you. So we'll meet the day before the workshop, and I'll do some variations of the glue swipe, and that should be fun. And then Wednesday, if you'd like to join me, that would be awesome. And I'll send you the links for all of the lives that I'll be doing. No need to sign up for that if you don't want to. I'll send you everything so you can join me. But if you want to sign up, that's fine as well. Go right ahead. But it should be fun. We'll have a cool workshop, and maybe welcome some new members to our pouring studio. So anyway, thanks so much for joining me, everyone. I will see you Friday, and hope you have a great rest of your week. Take care. Bye-bye.